Hey everyone, Jim Ballou here, and welcome back for another episode of Makeshift Madness. Today we will take a look at how we could put together a compact, affordable, and very portable shotgun reloading kit. Now the kit we will consider will not require reloading presses or dies or expensive powder scales or shell holders, but it will reload your shotgun shells. So stay tuned. Before getting into it, I have a short disclaimer. The ammunition reloading processes I will be talking about in this video could be considered fairly makeshift and in some aspects experimental. Whenever working with explosive gunpowders and firearms, a lot of things can go wrong. There are always risks involved. Just because I might feel comfortable taking certain risks, and even though I haven't yet blown myself up, doesn't mean that you won't. I recommend viewers do their own research and cross-reference their information from multiple sources. I want the viewers to be safe, but I can't control their unique circumstances or the level of attention to detail viewers will apply, and I simply cannot be responsible for anything you do. Now let's dive into it. The idea for my own kit was heavily inspired by several YouTube videos I've watched over the last 5 to 10 years. A few videos by bushcraft and survival instructor David Canterbury from his Pathfinder school in Ohio, and at least one video by Wade Rush on his YouTube channel, Bubba Roundtree Outdoors. I've incorporated some of their ideas and concocted a few of my own to develop what we will be taking a look at in this video. In some respects, the kit we will talk about here shares key aspects with the once popular and very compact classic Lee Loader kit, like this one designed for hand-loading 20-gauge shotgun shells without requiring the use of a reloading press. In my experience, these Lee Loader kits, which have been produced for decades to load a range of different handgun, rifle, and shotgun cartridges, are not as easy to find as they once were. However, the kit we will talk about creating is comprised of items and materials typically found around the house or the shop, requiring only very simple modifications, if any at all, and our kit will contain everything we will need to load shot shells, including the tools, the gunpowder, the powder measure, wads, or the complete means for making wads, and the shot. The processes we'll be considering here won't really be suitable for high production reloading, such as what a trap or skeet shooter might require, but as a portable means for producing perhaps enough loads for survival hunting or self-defense, kept in a self-contained compact kit assembled on the cheap that you could bring with you to hunting camp or conveniently keep in a remote cabin, this could be very expedient. Now, most viewers will likely already be familiar with the fundamental basics of how a shotgun shell is loaded, but for those who aren't, let's talk about it. In principle, we're using the very same general methodology while loading a shell that we would also use if we were loading any kind of muzzle-loading firearm, with only a few minor variations to accommodate the unique features of the self-contained cartridge. In both instances, we would provide the priming system at the base of the charge for ignition, with some type of gunpowder propellant in front of that, and then finally the projectile, or in the case of a shotgun, the multiple projectiles we call shot, over the powder. In a muzzle-loading rifle or pistol, say like a traditional Kentucky long rifle for example, a cloth patch might be used to envelope the bullet or ball, which helps hold it firmly over the powder and provides a gas seal of sorts inside the bore of the gun as it travels down the barrel upon firing. By contrast, a shotgun, or even a smoothbore musket if loaded as a shotgun, will use wads to accomplish these functions. In the early days of shotgun cartridges and muzzle-loading shotguns, wadding of various different types of materials was experimented with, including cork, cardboard, fiber, felt, leather, corn husks, hornet's nests, folded or wadded up paper, and even cloth rags. Typically, a shell would be loaded with an over-powder wad that served to separate the shot from the powder and provide a gas seal. These wads tended to have more thickness. The same shell would also use an overshot wad or an overshot card, which could be thinner than an over-powder wad since its function was merely to cover the shot and hold it firmly in place inside the shell. This is a brass-cased shotgun shell, which would have been more common perhaps in the 1870s and 1880s, with its black powder charge, fiber over powder wad, lead buckshot, and finally the overshot wad. Development of plastic shotgun wads in the 20th century expanded the functionality of the shotgun wad. With some plastic wad designs, the shot travels down the barrel in a little plastic cup, resulting in more consistency with shot patterns, while also providing a barrier of sorts between the shot and the gun's bore, an especially beneficial feature whenever using hard steel shot that creates more wear inside the gun's barrel than does soft lead shot if it were to rub in direct contact with the bore. Loaded shotgun shells will normally be crimped at the mouth to facilitate holding the contents within the case until firing. The two methods are the rolled crimp seen here on the left and the folded crimp on the right. With the rolled crimp, an overshot wad or card is necessary, whereas with the folded crimp it is not, as the folds themselves hold the contents firmly inside. The field expedient process of loading shotgun shells that we will look at in this video will not involve crimping the mouth of the shell at all, since with this we will assume we won't have access to a reloading press. We will have to use other means for holding the contents securely inside the shell. Because of this, I would not expect this type of hand load to be suitable for use in any magazine-fed shotgun, as I believe that could be problematic. I will be firing these loads in my breech-loading break-action guns. In trying to keep everything as basic and do-it-yourself as possible with this project, I started experimenting with making my own shotgun wads. I decided to use corrugated cardboard because it seems like the perfect material for this purpose, plus it's something commonly found in pretty much every household. I use a dime. It seems to be the exact diameter that I need, and so I just trace around the dime, cut them out with the scissors. And then once I have a couple of these little discs cut out, glue one right directly over the other, center it as best I can. And then once I have a double-decker wad, line it up, let it dry. Let's talk about gunpowder. Besides the primers, the empty shotgun shells, the shot, and whatever type of wadding we decide to use, we will need some type of gunpowder propellant. Conventional shotgun reloading nowadays will invariably entail using some type of modern smokeless gunpowder developed specifically for shotguns. While any of these will be cleaner burning than traditional black gunpowder, they are also quite expensive nowadays, and their prescribed measured charges must be more precise to avoid reaching dangerously excessive chamber pressures. In the field without access to precision powder scales, the use of modern smokeless powders could be problematic. By contrast, traditional black gunpowder was often measured by volume rather than by weight, and the quantity used for each load could be within a broader range before encountering problems, depending on the type of firearm and its bore size, the grade of powder, weight of the bullet, type and thickness of the patching, etc. For example, a muzzleloading Kentucky rifle with a bore diameter of say 45 to 50 caliber might perform safely with a patched round ball and powder charges anywhere from perhaps 45 to maybe 90 grains or more of black powder without creating excessive chamber pressures. But this same degree of variance with any modern smokeless gunpowder could definitely be disastrous. Black powder is graded by the fineness or coarseness of its granulation, indicated by the number of Fs in the designation. For example, FG is considered very coarse with large granulation and is best suited for very large bore weapons like cannons. 2F powder, or FFG, is generally considered suitable for large bore small arms such as muskets, shotguns, and rifles of 50 caliber and larger. 3FG is typically used in handguns, small bore squirrel rifles, and even muzzleloading rifles with bore diameters up to about 50 caliber. 4F is very fine and was commonly used as a priming powder in the flash pans of flintlocks because its fine granulation gives it a faster burn rate and it is easier to ignite than coarser grades. During the flintlock era, it was common for shooters to carry two separate powder horns or flasks, one for the main charge powder and a smaller horn for priming the pan. Black powder was the universal gunpowder used in all firearms cannons and pretty much all exploding devices for literally centuries, and it could still be used in some modern firearm ammunition. However, within about the last 2 decades maybe, traditional black powder has become annoyingly difficult to find, and wherever it can be found, it tends to be expensive. Up until I think the early 2000s, I could still buy a new 1 pound can of black powder at our local gun store for around $9 to $10. But nowadays, that same 1 pound can might cost $30 or more at gun shows if you can find it, and our local stores no longer even carry it. The ingredients for black gunpowder are simple: sulfur, saltpeter, also called potassium nitrate, and charcoal. But there's a process for properly mixing these ingredients, and that would be a discussion for another video. To demonstrate the difference in the nature of how a typical modern smokeless shotgun powder burns as compared to traditional black powder, I will drop a lit match on a small pile of each, beginning with Winchester's AA shotgun powder, followed by Goex 3FG black powder. Viewers will notice how the smokeless powder gives more of a sustained and cleaner burn as opposed to the instant flash and billow of smoke produced by the black powder. Black powder is notoriously filthy burning, corrosive, and it produces a lot of smoke. Much care is also necessary while handling it because it ignites so easily with even the tiniest spark or a tiny ember from a campfire. Fortunately for us nowadays, there are black powder substitutes that are more widely available, such as the Pyrodex powders from Hodgdon that retain some of the advantages of true black powder in that powder charges can vary considerably without posing safety concerns, while also being somewhat cleaner burning and less sensitive to spark. Pyrodex is still available off the shelf at my local gun store while filming this video. Pyrodex P is the 3FG equivalent, but for loading shot shells we will be using Pyrodex RS, which is the 2FG equivalent. Of course, this video would not be complete without having a discussion about the shotgun fodder. Traditionally, muzzleloading and cartridge shotguns were loaded with pure lead, or mostly lead round pellets of one size or another that we call shot, in some measured quantity, with the smaller diameter pellets of BB size or smaller referred to as birdshot, and larger than BB size called buckshot. Within, I believe, the last 5 or 6 years, lead shot of any size has become rather difficult to find in local stores, and wherever it can be found, such as on the internet, it tends to be a lot more expensive than it used to be, especially with the shipping costs involved, as lead is very heavy. Now, if you can get your hands on some traditional lead shot for your kit, that's ideal. But if not, a few workable alternatives are still available. I consider BB size shot to be a very versatile choice for general purpose with a shotgun. Although pure lead BBs would generally be preferable for use in our shot shells, given their malleable nature and higher density, we can alternatively get by using the more commonly available and cheaper coated steel BBs if they're all we have. The copper or zinc plated BBs widely available nowadays for use in modern Daisy or Crossman BB guns actually have no lead in them at all. They are steel with either a copper or zinc coating, and each BB weighs approximately 5 grains and measures from 0.171 to 0.177 inch in diameter. And we can use a magnet to determine the composition of the BBs if we have any doubts about it. Let's weigh some BBs on the scale. Here I've got a lead BB, and it comes in at a little bit over 9 grains. Let's weigh a copper-coated steel BB. It's a little heavier than 5 grains. That BB is coming in just under 6 grains, 5.5 grains. So that's the copper-plated steel BB. The lead BBs sold for use in shotguns as shot pellets have a standard diameter of 0.180 inch. After weighing a number of different BBs, there appears to be an average difference between the lead and the steel of about 3 grains per pellet comparison. If we calculate the math figuring 60 BBs, which is about the maximum amount that seems to comfortably fit inside one of our trimmed 12 gauge shells, the coated steel BBs at an average of 5.5 grains apiece will give us a payload of roughly 3/4 of an ounce, whereas the lead figuring 9 grains apiece will have roughly 1 1/4 ounce payload. Either load could be used effectively in a 12 gauge. Another viable alternative to standard shot for your scattergun is the split shot fishing sinker. Sinkers are made of lead, available everywhere fishing tackle is sold, and come in different sizes. I've considered the idea of using these in my smoothbore muzzleloaders for years, but never actually tried any before. And then I watched one of Wade Rush's videos wherein he walks his viewers through his process of loading shot shells with split shots. And of course, I had to experiment with the idea myself. I think fishing sinkers work just about as well as regular shot. As Wade explains, it's easy enough to squeeze the split close using pliers to create a more spherical pellet, although the load would probably be just as effective at normal shotgun range without taking that step. The plain split shots are probably slightly more suitable than the reusable type with wings, as Wade calls them, like this example on the left, simply because they have a more uniform shape and they might pattern better. Let's take a close look at the various components that are currently in the kit that I put together. Let's start with the kit container. So at Harbor Freight, I found this little tool bag that's made out of canvas, and it's advertised as 11 inches long, and it's 8 inches tall, and it is 6 or 7 inches wide. And so that's the perfect size, in my opinion, for what I'm trying to do. Next, I had this little plastic bottle that with a screw-on lid, and I put my Pyrodex powder into that because the bottle that it comes in, the 1 pound bottle, is a little bit fat for the kit, in my opinion. And I was able to get almost the full 1 pound can of Pyrodex into this plastic bottle that measures 6.5 inches tall by 2 3/4 inches in diameter. So it's almost a pound. Here's an assortment of shot right here that I keep in the kit, and it gets kind of heavy, but right here I've got this little bottle with number 4 buck, which is 24 caliber. Here I've got the copper plated BBs. Here I've got some lead BBs in this little bottle, and in here I've got some 31 caliber lead balls, and this is number 6 bird shot that I've actually salvaged out of cartridges that I've dissected. In this little container, I keep just an assortment of fishing sinkers. Now, this part of the kit right here was something that took me a little bit of time to come up with. I wanted an anvil of sorts for my cases, and I wanted something I could fit my case on that I could seat my primers on. And I was thinking, okay, how am I going to keep this upright in the woods? If I'm out in the woods, do I strap it to a branch? Do I drive into the ground, or do I have a little vise I can clamp it to? And eventually I thought, well, just make a base. So what I have here is I've got this little hardwood base. I was going through my scrap hardwood, and I found this piece of, in this case, walnut, and it's like 1 inch tall by 2 inches wide by, I think I cut it right at 5.5 inches. So it's not very big, but it makes a good base for my mandrel, which is also, I'm also using it, going to use it as a rammer or a punch for seating my wads and over my powder. This is a 5/8, by the way. It's a 5/8 hardwood oak dowel, 5/8 diameter, and I made a 5/8 hole in this block of wood, and this just fits in there firmly. So you could set this on a stump, and I've drilled a couple little holes, and I've got some 20 penny nails, which I can, if I want to hammer that onto a stump, I can do it, or in the dirt even if I want to. But it's fairly stable little base. So I probably won't usually have to use the nails, but in a worst case scenario, I could actually believe I could use this nail as a decapping punch. So it looks like that would work. So that's what that's all about. Here we've got a little funnel, which I think I just found this at the dollar store, a package of 3 it came in. So it's super cheap, the funnels, super handy though. And then of course you're gonna need primers, shotgun primers. 209 is what shotguns use. And I've got a little disposable lighter, which I use with my candles, that I can melt the wax into the case, and if I want to seal it that way. That's what the lighter is all about. And I've also, as far as that goes, candles, I've also got some glue sticks, and you'll see me use these in the videos. I've got a little tiny bottle of white glue, which is another way to do it. And here I've got just a retractable, I think it's a sheetrock knife, but this is a handy tool if you've got a fired 12 gauge shell and you want to trim away the crimping. Just cut around, works really well. And that's how I trimmed this. I just used the knife. Another way is you could probably use the little, I've got this little pair of compact scissors, stainless steel scissors for this kit. And that would help with that project potentially also. And I've got a couple cloth rags for expedient wadding perhaps, or for cleaning out. If I want to clean out a case, you can see they get kind of dirty when you shoot them, especially with the Pyrodex powder I'm using. Now for depriming, and you'll see me talk more about this in the video, but it's just a socket that fits the base of the 12 gauge shell. And so it's got a hole in the base. It's really handy for that. And then for the decapping punch, I made this out of I bought these screws a while back. I was using them for connecting some 4x4s. So it was quite a bit longer, and I shortened it and I ground it into a taper right there. It's good hard steel. So that's my depriming punch that I've been using. And then for tapping on things, I took just a little ball peen hammer that I picked up at a yard sale for I think $2, and it had a long handle, and I shortened the handle so it's more compact for my kit. For handling small bird shot and that sort of thing, I've got this little pair of tweezers, and I just keep a cork on it so it doesn't poke things in the kit. This little piece of dowel, little 3/8 dowel, it's a piece of oak, and I think it's about 2.5 inches long, but I tapered one end slightly so I could use it as if I want to seat a primer, I've got a punch I can use in conjunction with my hammer, and it just fits right over that primer, and it's blunt enough to where it's not going to set off the primer. As far as powder measuring and measuring my shot loads, my local gun store carries these. It adjusts in, I don't know if you can see that, but it adjusts in 10 grain increments. So it goes all the way up to 120 grains. And then it just tightens up with the little set screw. And so it's a handy little thing. Some of these powder measures, like this brass one from Traditions that I bought recently at a local sporting goods store for right at $20, have a convenient funnel attached at the top to minimize spilling while pouring powder into a gun barrel or into a shell. You don't want to buy one of those, and you can find somebody that's got empty 4570 cases, and you can get one. From my experiment, this will hold flush to the top, will hold 80 grains of Pyrodex RS. If you go down about to there, you're gonna have 70 grains. So it's not exact, but it's good enough for what I'm doing. And also I can use this for just a generalized shot measure. So with BBs, I've found that this will hold 55 BBs. I've filled it up and dumped it out and counted 3 times, and I call this 55 BBs right here. So you want to go a little bit more than that, you add to it. And then of course I have a little small, very small slip joint pliers that I picked up at a yard sale for squeezing split shot sinkers. Squeeze them down so they're more round and maybe more consistent to be used as shot. The only other thing is you need some kind of wadding. And so here I've got a bag with just assorted wadding. Some of them are homemade. In a pinch, you could use the cloth rags for the wads, but that's basically it. And everything that you see here that will fit into that little bag, it weighs just a little bit over 10 pounds. So that's not bad for a kit that you can use in a remote place or out in the field. And it'll completely, with everything you have there, you can completely reload your shotgun shells. Now, our first order of business before we can reload our shotgun shells is we have to deprime the fired cases. And what I've done here is I've taken a 7/8 socket. It was a little bit taller, and I cut part of it off to make it a little bit more compact for the kit, but it's already got a hole in the center. It fits the case really well, and so it's going to work really well for our purposes. So we just take this long screw and I ground off the threads, tapered the end so it fits the primer pocket. I center it in there, and then with my shortened hammer I just tap out the primer, and there it is. The load I'm going to create here is going to be somewhat similar to what I saw David Canterbury created in one of his videos. I've taken a 12 gauge shell and I've trimmed off the crimped folded plastic, so it's a bit short. I don't know if it's going to be long enough, but we'll see. And so first thing I need to do is I need to prime it, fit the dowel in there. And so I've got a fairly secure mandrel, and I'm just going to fit this over that. I'm going to grab one of these Winchester 209 shotgun primers, seat one of these primers. And so I'm going to put it right there. I've got this little piece of dowel, and do this where you can see it a little better. And I'm just going to tap that thing in there. Tap it down flush. That's flush. So primed. Now what we're going to do, I've got this brass powder measure, and we are going to set that at 70 grains, which is right about there. And we're going to put some Pyrodex RS. It's going to be a little bit of a spill, but no big deal. Okay. So that's my powder measure flush at 70 grains. And then I'm just going to dump that in to my 12 gauge shell. Next, I've made these little wads. I'm going to use my mandrel, seat this makeshift wad over the powder. Okay, so that's over the powder. There's not a whole lot of room inside there, but I'm thinking that we can get, maybe this is a 4570 casing, and I'm using just copper plated BBs, standard BBs, which are available almost everywhere. So I'll see if that amount of BBs will fit into the shell. Let's see. Oh yeah, it fits. Probably get a few more in there. Yeah, so let's get a few more in there. So it's That's the volume capacity of the amount of BBs that I'm using. And then I'm just going to put another one of these homemade 2-layer disc wads out of corrugated cardboard, and I'm just going to press that over the top. And there it is. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal that with wax. So I've lit this little candle, and I'm just going to melt some wax into the case to seal that top wad. There it is. There it is. It's ready to shoot. And this is fairly close to what David Canterbury was loading in one video I saw, except for for wadding, he was folding up a piece of cloth and just shoving that down over the powder, and then he had his BBs on top of that, and then over the BBs he put another folded up wadding of cloth, and then he waxed it in over the top of that. And here I just use cardboard, so it's the only difference, I think. And we'll see how this thing shoots. So I've got about 10 yards here.
Yeah.
And I've got my shot shell with BBs in it that I loaded. So this is the chunk of plywood I shot at with the load that had the BBs in it. It was about 10 yards, and my pattern's a little bit wide with it, but the BBs did actually go completely through this 1/4-inch plywood. All of them did. And so I think if you were fortunate enough to actually hit your target at that distance, you would definitely have some food on your table. Here's an experimental load I want to try. So I've got a 12 gauge empty case. It's already primed, ready to go. I've got a 4570 case filled basically to the top with Pyrodex RS powder, and I've used my powder measure to check the grainage. Dump that into my case, and so I've got it set at 80 grains. So I've been doing some experimenting, and so I know that 80 grains is what the empty 4570 case will throw powder wise. And so now with wads, I have options. I've created some of these out of 11-ounce cowhide leather wads, and I thought I would at least try that. And if it doesn't work, I'll try one of my cardboard wads if I've got this too tight. And so maybe. And I've got my dowel rammer. I'm just gonna ram that down. So I think that looks like that'll work. And for shot, I'm going to use number B size fishing sinkers, and I'm going to dump into there. I don't think I have room for another leather wad, so I'm going to use one of my corrugated cardboard wads over that. Press it in there. Nice and flush. And I'm going to use, in this case, I'm going to use a glue stick to seal it, as opposed to using just wax. So we'll see how this works. Yeah, maybe. Kind of a gooey mess. But all we're trying to do is seal the top. That's all we're trying to do. I think that just might work. Yeah, there we are. See how that works on the water jug. Now the final load I'm going to make for this video is using fishing sinkers, split shots, as my shot. And I've got several different sizes, so I'm gonna mix it up. It's gonna be like a duplex load. And on the largest size I have here, and I closed them with pliers, the split shots, and they are, as you can see, they're right about 31 caliber. So that's what the largest size, and then I have two different sizes, I think, in here. But that's gonna be my shot. And so first thing, of course, we're going to use Pyrodex powder, and we're going to fill the 4570 case all the way for roughly 80 grains. We're going to have an 80 grain load, which you can go all the way up to 100 grains. I've heard of people doing it. So I'm going to use one of my cardboard wads and my rammer, and seep that down firmly over the powder. I'm gonna put as much of these sinkers as I can fit in there, mixed sizes. That'll do it. Put a wad on top, an overshot wad, and use my rammer to help that process. There it is. And in this case, instead of using wax or glue stick, I'm going to use regular household white glue. And I'm just going to glue that thing, run a bead around the edge of my case. Let the glue dry. So that'll be my third load for this video. The shot pattern with the load that had the fishing sinkers in it was a little bit tighter than the one that had the BBs in it, and this was at the same distance, 10 yards. So it seems to perform a little bit better with the lead sinkers, at least in my experience with this. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like and share, and we'll see you again next time.